Welcome to Rewatch-and-Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. And today's episode is Xena Warrior Princess Season 1, Episode 6, The Reckoning. Episode in a nutshell is a brief reminder of what happens in this episode. So, at the start of the episode, Xena and Gabrielle are, of course, traveling as they do, and she comes across the sounds of people being slaughtered. So she hurries her horse along as Gabrielle continues to walk and comes across a hooded man killing innocent farmers who are on their way home from market in order to rob them. She faces the hooded man and they are on par with each other, but she eventually does manage to drive him off before trying to save the only surviving farmer. This ultimately, though, is not a great thing. Well, it's a good thing in general, but for her, not necessarily a great thing because the rest of the villagers all come and they see her with the blood on her hands from trying to save this guy, blood on the sword from where she wounded the hooded man, who turns out to be Ares, and ultimately decide to arrest her. At first, she tries to run away because she realizes their fervor in wanting to place blame has led them to not necessarily seeing reason. And we do see this because after she is captured, the villagers basically want to kill her without a trial. They try to drag her behind a horse before she's ever convicted. At first, they don't even want to give her representation, though Gabrielle does eventually get to be her representation and makes a pretty good case, though again, villagers are pretty blinded. And then they even go into her cell and while she is chained up, start to beat her because they believe that she is guilty and will not listen to any other option because by the time they got there, the hooded man was gone. The reason I said the one she saved wasn't good for her is that he eventually wakes up. And because of the trauma of his injuries, he basically can only say that the last thing he saw before he passed out was her with a bloody sword and his blood on her hands, which basically is like very incriminating. While all this is going on, she of course is in the cell, and Ares decides to come down and try to seduce her back to her old ways because, he wants her not to be just a warrior princess, but his warrior queen, and says he misses her and that she's beautiful and that, they should rule side by side. He even prints up an entire parchment full of all these good things they could do once they conquered the world together, which would help the citizens too. So, it's like, you could still do good, conquer the world, and impose your good on the world. But of course, Xena sees through this and well, honestly, they do have flirty vibes. I've mentioned in the last episode, they've got flirty vibes, but she ultimately knows that the path she was going down before was the wrong path and she's now on the right path. So she decides to continue that path, but because Ares is so interested in her, and obviously so, she decides to kind of trick him and makes a deal after calling him that he will, to prevent the villagers from killing her, send her protectors. So, and she can choose anyone. So when she is then brought out and the guilty verdict is being said, she then basically sees Ares, which the others can't see, and speaks to him and says, "You promised I could have anyone. I call upon the protectors." And then she lists out the villagers that she was accused of killing, who then come out of one of the huts completely alive. And this, of course, is thrilling for the villagers because now nobody's dead, so there's no reason to convict anybody of their murders. And also these ones, because, they had passed on, they knew the truth of what happened and they weren't, having memory issues due to, surviving the trauma because they didn't survive it, come out and basically said, "This woman is the goodest, most wonderful woman that's ever existed. Great heart. She saved us. It was a masked man that attacked us. she's wonderful and all of this, and then, basically she's forgiven everything because now the villagers who died have vouched for her. Ares acknowledges that she manipulated him well, job well done, kisses her hand, like her fingers, as he's leaving and says that, they'll meet again, which they will, and all's well that ends well. So now that we've been reminded about what happened in the episode, it is time to rank the episode. First on our mostly objective ranking, followed by the personal ranking. So first we have our single episode supporting character introductions, and there were quite a few villagers, but the two main ones was Benatar, who was would it be like a magistrate? No, that might not be the right word. He's basically someone who the villagers have elected to see justice done within their village. I don't know if he's like specifically the headman or only specifically for crime or criminal trials, but either way, Benatar is the one who oversees the hearing, eventually allows Gabrielle to be Xena's representation at the hearing, and is the one who fights to have Xena be given a fair trial when originally the villagers want to just execute her without due process, essentially. Um, and then the leader of the village mob that's trying to hurt Xena and get her killed without conviction, and you know went in and led those who were like beating her in the prison cell and wanted to drag her behind a horse and all that other stuff was Piranus, who was just like really upset that his friends died, but still his behavior was unacceptable. Um, they're worth 1 point each. Then we have 3 points for our multi-season supporting character introduction. And I have to say, of all the personified deities that exist within the Xena Hercules universe, Ares is my favorite. So very happy to see him there and in his final form. Because like in Hercules in the start of season 1 that we've already done on this channel, he was kind of existing in sort of like a metaphorical, no, it was a metaphorical, I don't think that's the right word either. But anyways, more of a pool of bubbling red liquid and, an altar or just a voice or as like a weird mechanical machine or as possessing people. But he didn't appear personified in the way like that Aphrodite did, for example, in the early season of Hercules. But this is his official casting and he does cross both like Hercules and Xena universes. And well, I mentioned in a previous episode, I think just the last episode, to be honest, that in the Xena universe, I 100% ship Ares with Xena, and I was so tempted to put them as a supporting relationship development, but I don't think in canon they ever actually get together. I could be misremembering, but I don't think they actually ever do get together, unlike in Hercules, where Xena and Hercules did get together briefly. So I resisted, and I want to honorably mention that I wanted very badly to put that there because he did spend this entire episode trying to somewhat seduce her, but he was trying to seduce her to the dark side, though I think, he's definitely they have the flirty vibes, they have the chemistry. They have such great chemistry. But yeah, Kevin Smith as Ares, best character in the series. So happy that they're finally introduced to each other and he is introduced here because it is implied that Xena, of course, knew about Ares and had wondered about what Ares might look like or who he was when she was like the warrior princess, but she'd never met him until this episode. And, one of the things that he says when he first comes over is that, like the problem that he has is that she stopped wondering what he looked like because, he's her biggest fan. And oh, I just loved everything about that part of this episode. So, yeah, 3 points there. And then we had the multi-season main character developments. We had Xena being arrested. Um, and I guess to a lesser extent, Gabrielle did play lawyer, but I'm not really counting that as or should I count it? Hmm. I'm deciding live, which I don't usually do. So Xena was arrested. That is a development. And I guess to a certain extent, Gabrielle plays lawyer as her representation in this episode. And she does end up, trying to break Xena out. She even, like, before they try to drag her with the horse, she, like, goes and wraps the rope around her neck and basically says, "You'll be a murderer if you try this twice over because you'd be killing her and Xena." Um, but I don't know that Gabrielle playing lawyer is enough to actually give points. I feel like maybe it's more of an honorable mention. I'm gonna say honorable mention actually. So Xena being arrested is the main character development, 4 points. That does bring us up to 9 points. And now we have the negatives. So first off, we have a character regression. There is a point in the episode where Xena is somewhat giving into Ares and kind of goes into a bit of a trance-like state. She's being beaten. Ares then basically pulls her into like a mental realm to try to seduce her again. And she kind of, in her weakened state, because she is being beaten by these villagers who are not following due process, that would be Pranis, um, she goes into kind of like a blind rage trance. She breaks the chains and she starts beating up everybody. And then Gabrielle even comes in and she ends up, in her blind rage, hitting Gabrielle as well. But Gabrielle forgives her for this because she knows that it's not actually Xena and that she was under a trance and under the influence. But it is doing that to her best friend who causes her to come out of the trance and to also feel a bit guilty about it and almost be like, I'll let them kill me for my past crimes, even if I didn't do this one. I've done plenty of other things. Let, this be my comeuppance for it 'cause she feels so guilty about it. Um, and then she does try to heal them afterwards. But I do think falling into a blind rage to the point where you would attack somebody that you know you would never attack in your right mind is a character regression for Xena. And then I did take negative messaging or behavior points. And the first one was trying to convict without a trial and violence against an unarmed prisoner, which is exactly what happened to Xena in this episode, was very negative messaging or behavior. There was also the erasure of evidence by Ares. So Ares, of course, attacked these people as a hooded man, disappeared because he's a god before, the villagers arrived, which essentially frames Xena. But like I didn't count it as framing because it's more like mistaken identity in the fact that the villagers come to this thing, they only see her, so they of course think she has to have done it because there's nobody else there. So he himself was evidence that he erased. Then Gabrielle, when trying to gather evidence, goes back to the scene, sees both Xena and Ares' footprints, goes to get Benatar to show him, like, look, there was another person, here's the footprints. Then Ares shows up, and because he's trying to seduce Xena actively and doesn't want her to go free yet, decides to erase, his own footprints. So when Xena brings Benatar, Benatar's like, "You're wasting my time. There's nothing here," um, which also is very bad. So I took 2 points for those as well. That was 5 points down, which then ultimately leaves us with 4 points for this episode, which is a bit disappointing, but that is the nature of the mostly objective ranking. Which then brings our mostly objective ranking so far to in first, Sins of the Past, Dreamworker, Cradle of Hope, this episode in fourth place, The Reckoning, Chariots of War, and then The Path Not Taken in sixth place. However, for me personally, like I said, I really liked certain aspects of this episode. When Xena and Ares are on the screen together, pure joy. Like I said, Ares is my favorite character. That's not one of the main characters like either Hercules or Xena, so um, obviously pure joy watching that. So it put me in a great mood. Um, however, like the overall concept of the episode with the trials, being a prisoner, etc., etc., isn't necessarily my favorite plot that they've had, and it does feel a little bit repetitive because we have seen her throughout this these first few episodes of season 1 having to reckon with her past and the fact that she did bad things in her past. And because we're still in the early episodes, I mostly forgive that. If they drag it out too long, then it's going to get annoying. But because we're at the start, I have the presence of mind to say, okay, yeah, I get why you have to keep bringing up this past because, it takes time for people to change their mind. And while her reputation may be changing in other places where news of her good deeds hasn't reached yet, her previous reputation probably is still intact. So she's going to have to reckon with that for some time before or until news spreads of how awesome she is. So I can live with that. But essentially, the main point I want to make is that I was joyous watching this episode because I thought Aries is my favorite character. I think Aries and Xena would make a phenomenal couple. They have so much chemistry. And a lot of the episode was, her in that mindscape being seduced by Aries while, the trials were kind of more of like a secondary. And I even liked the fact that when she got the better of him, instead of being petty about it and refusing to bring back the villagers, going back on his deal or anything like that, which he could do because he is a god. He could do whatever he wanted. He chooses not to, accepts that he was well played, probably because he likes her so much, and brings them back and lets her have her win. He even accepts with grace, as he's leaving, raises her hand, kisses her fingers, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is just so perfect. And I know they're more of a fan fiction couple because obviously they do not exist in canon as a full-fledged couple, I don't think, at any point. I could be misremembering. There's a lot of episodes, 6 seasons, but I'm fairly certain while every time they're on screen together, I do feel flirty vibes. I do not think that they ever actually become anything even like a couple. But in my fan fiction mind, they are in love. And so I personally greatly enjoyed this episode. And like I said, it put me in a great mood, brought me joy, and enough joy that I decided ultimately to give it a 9. Because the trial side of things wasn't my favorite, I didn't give it a 10. So it did end up in second place after Sins of the Past was this episode, The Reckoning. Then we had Cradle of Hope, Dreamworker, Chariots of War, and in sixth place so far, The Path Not Taken. But that now brings us to our final segment, which is our series ranking so far. Whoop. And I lost my mouse. But what was I saying? Right, mostly objective ranking has 38 out of 240 on season 1. And then on the personal ranking, it's at 43 out of 240, and you can tell I am super excited and joyous because my brain stopped working. But with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Xena Warrior Princess Season 1, Episode 6, The Reckoning. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.